Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition podcast, sponsored by the Polsky Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. I'm Brian O'Connor, adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at Chicago Booth, and I'm pleased to be joined today by a good friend and colleague, Shamus Hines, who is in the thick of his search as we speak. So,
That's right.
Shamus, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
We'd love to hear a little bit about your background, and then I think maybe if you could share some statistics, being sort of in the heart of your search, I think everybody would enjoy hearing a little bit about that.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, thank you for having me. So I am in the thick of it. I'm about 6.5 months into my search. I raised a fund in November of last year, but even before that, I'm a Midwest guy, grew up in the Midwest, grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Did my undergrad at the University of Michigan, ended up working for about 10 years, coming back into school about, I think it was 7 years prior to starting my work in financial services. Got my MBA at the University of Chicago, and just, generally speaking, always been in love with doing middle market work, getting involved with small companies. My father is a business broker. I kind of grew up with that in my background.
So you've been in this environment.
I've been in this environment my entire life, and glad to be back into it.
Yeah, great. Let's, I think we'd all love hearing a little bit about where you're at in your search. How far in? From my understanding, you're about 6 months into your search.
That's right.
Give us some statistics. How many business owner meetings, calls have you had? How many indications of interest have you submitted? LOIs? How many signed LOIs?
Absolutely. So I've been really focused in the beginning of my search. So I've had probably lower amounts of activity, I think, than like what a normal search would have. But I had a very specific industry that I had in mind, financial services. So the calls themselves might be a little bit on the lower side, but I've had about 60 calls with business owners scheduled. A lot of ad hoc calls, which I don't keep track of. I've met in person with 26 different business owners to date. I've also submitted about 10 IOIs, and then of that, I've had 6 go to LOI, and in the process of negotiating 3 active LOIs right now.
Okay, so you're truly in the thick of it. So thank you for spending time with us. I'm sure this is a busy time. Let's talk a little bit about this juggling act that all of searchers and entrepreneurship through acquisition professionals need to go through. I mean, there are a tremendous amount of activities and demands on your time. Help us understand how you manage your time and the responsibilities associated with each of those activities during the search phase.
Not well, I'd say. I'm trying. It's a work in progress. I'm always learning. I started off by, I really had this idea of just doing everything. And I thought, you know what, whenever there was an opportunity to get on the phone, I'm getting on the phone, I'm gonna call. I wasn't as structured. As time evolved, it's just become clearer and clearer how important that structure is. So now I follow a pretty regular schedule. I've got Monday and Thursday, I'll be sending outbound communication out to business owners for no other magic reason than I've heard other people say it's a good time to reach out. It's Monday mornings and Thursday afternoons. And the rest of the week, I'll just spend preparing on that and following up on that. So a typical Monday would be 9 a.m. emails, and then I'd be glued to the seat waiting for any phone calls, emails to come back in after the outbound communication I send. Tuesday, Wednesday, researching industries, following up, scheduling meetings, going out and doing visits if I can, and then Thursday afternoon, emails again, the whole thing.
Great. So you're now sort of advancing on 3 opportunities, it sounds like. How have you found the balance between pushing those deals forward while making sure that your pipeline doesn't run dry? As we all sort of know, things happen and deals fall apart, right? Depending on any stage of the process. How have you found the balance there of managing that pipeline while pushing forward deal flow?
It's, again, a work in progress. I think early on I had struggled with it because I didn't really understand all that went into the deal making process, like how to structure a deal, all the counterparts you have to speak to. So it was a much more consuming in the early process. But as time's gone on, I've learned there are natural pauses in that deal process. And when I can feel that there's sort of that natural pause going on, I just take action. And that's when I'll be going out and trying to build up a pipeline again. But there's no magic to it. I think it's just trial and error and doing what you can.
Yeah. Now, and we'll spend a little bit more time on this because I think that it's important to note that really time is your most scarce resource during this whole process. You're funded for a period of time, and really you need to take action and make things happen during that 2-year process that you've been funded for. What have you found to be the biggest time commitment? What occupies the majority of your time as you're thinking about allocating across these various activities?
Again, in the early process, I think it's, for me, it's been the things that I didn't have as much experience with. So structuring these deals, thinking about how to present the offer to a business owner. I've spent a lot of time just trying to think about how I might do that. I don't have that background in private equity or investment banking to really rely on. So that's been a bigger time commitment of mine than I'd like it to be. But really just taking all that information and getting better with it over time, I think that will tail off. But right now, it's a big part of my time.
We're, we often try to leverage the time that's extremely scarce. Have you found any ways to do that through the use of interns, through the use of outsourcing certain activities and parts of your search? Can you talk a little bit about how you've leveraged your time?
Without a doubt, yeah, absolutely. So it's difficult to leverage your time on this deal structuring. I mean, this is something that you have to be intimately involved with, so I can't really do it well there. The areas that I can, that I found helpful, are with using interns certainly on list building. Where typically what I'll do, and I've had the most success with, is I'll identify industries that I like at a high level, and then I'll try and do some sort of preliminary screening on them and bring in some, go to some databases like Reference USA, go out to some trade show websites, pull lists, and then I'll send them to my interns and they'll fill in all the data for me. They'll send me nice lists like that. So that's a good way to leverage my time. Just the tasks that, don't take a lot of experience yet, that they can kind of get their hands on and sort of get a feel for it. I think those are good things to use the interns for. I've also leveraged some of my time using help desk, outsourced help desk, for similar things, filling in data. Sure. And then some of the research too. I've had the interns get involved in the research process. I'll give them a list of industries that I like and just tell them to have at it. Get in there and just give me as much information as they can get their hands on.
What's the general profile of these interns that you're utilizing? What are their backgrounds? From an experience level, where are they? So
I have stuck with the Chicago region. I want to have the ability to meet with people in person if I can. Just schools around the Chicago area. I've just through ease, I think I've come across DePaul and University of Chicago with the same system. I can upload a job posting, and it's literally, that's all I've done to begin with. It's just posted on that. It's called Handshake, and so I've used a lot of DePaul. I've used a lot of University of Chicago students, and it's been a mix of undergraduate and MBAs. And there's good and bad things to both, but they've both been really positive.
Yeah. How are you? Some of the activities that you're describing are labor intensive, and they're tough. Spending your full day building a list, or chasing down and profiling an industry. How are you keeping these guys motivated?
Well, it was.
Or is it enough? Or is it enough to work with Shamus Hines?
Definitely, that's part of it, for sure. Absolutely. No, this is my second quarter doing it. In the first quarter, I really struggled with that. I didn't know. It was a lot of trial and error. In the second quarter, I brought on a team of 6, and I did it purposefully. I wanted to have 2 different pods of 3, basically, in terms of interns. And I have one in each group that sort of leads the group and coordinates and schedules with them. And then I have 2 junior interns. I had them compete against each other. And I literally will have different challenges that I'm putting forward with them, and I have them present in front of the group, and then I name a winner. And that's been
great.
A pretty decent motivator.
That's great. What are some of the metrics and the challenge? I'm interested to hear about the challenge. Is it number of companies identified? Is it attractiveness of industry that they're developing a thesis around? Tell me about these challenges. I'm interested to hear.
Well, the first was on day one, I had all interns pick an industry and they had to pitch it in front of the group without any experience before and doing probably industry research. Some of them did, but most of them didn't. And I wanted them to sort of learn from each other, and we all just sat in a room. I didn't want it to make it, super intense, but I wanted them to kind of air out their ideas and have people provide critical feedback so they could get a better understanding of what it is to get, what a good industry is. Sure. And how other people think about it. So we started that way. And then going forward, some of the challenges that we put together, it is a list building challenge. I've done that a couple of times now, and it's all about response rates. I don't want them giving me, just a big number of leads that aren't going to be great prospects to follow up on. I want it to have high quality. So it's been percentage of follow-up rate that I'm having to do a challenge on.
That's great. I love the use of metrics. What gets measured gets done, as we say. So great. Let's shift gears a little bit into sort of the best practices that you're utilizing in your search. Have you found any tools or resources to be particularly helpful in generating deal flow, in vetting industries, in staying organized? Give us a little bit of insight into sort of how the wheels stay in motion with your search.
Absolutely. I'm pretty basic when it comes to tools in terms of organization. I've not found a good way of using a CRM. So I've been, my career prior to this, I've been a salesperson for 10 years, and I've had all sorts of CRMs that I've had access to. I've never been a huge fan personally. So I'm using Outlook, Excel. I'm using Google Drive to organize a lot of my files, and I can have interns access that remotely. I'm using Gmass to send out my email campaigns, which is a fantastic resource. If you're not aware, it's free email blasts that you can use, drip campaigns that Google's offering now. I also use, in terms of research, I've asked all my interns to put together lists of the resources they have available at their colleges, and that would be through DePaul and University of Chicago, and it's a big list of them, including things like IBIS, and then First Research in terms of industry research. And I'll use, as I mentioned before, Reference USA for list building, Inc. 5000. Those are some things I'll use for list building.
Great. As it relates to the outreach and the deal sourcing strategy that you've adhered to and found the best results from, where are you spending the majority of your time? Is it in developing these lists and reaching out on sort of what we might call proprietary deal sourcing strategy, or is it more intermediary driven? Are you spending time working with folks like your father who have access to willing sellers? Help us understand sort of the mix between those two channels of deal flow.
I've used a little bit of both, and I've seen both be successful strategies for searchers. However, as I mentioned, I started my search very focused, and I had great data on the types of companies that I wanted to go after. So it was all proprietary in the beginning. And as that started to work its course, I wanted to bolster my deal flow, so I ended up using a lot of brokered and intermediated deal flow. There's pluses and minuses to it. I think a lot of the things that I was getting my hands on and seeing were they're very high multiples. They were not as high quality deals in the intermediate space. Not to say that you can't find them. I think you have to be very careful about understanding of the process and who you're dealing with and how sophisticated that seller or that banker or the business broker is. Is this a part-time thing for them? Is it a full-time? If you have a part-time thing, you're going to have I think a better opportunity of making a real serious impact on that process and getting it into a deal. So I've used both, but I've flipped now back. Mainly to proprietary, and all the deals that I'm working right now are proprietary deals.
Let's talk a little bit about that proprietary channel. So you've developed these theses, and the interns are continuing to generate ideas on new and interesting industries. Can you give us an example of where you're spending some time currently?
In terms of I'm sorry, researching industries?
Researching as well as developing lists and outbound campaigns and generating deal flow. I mean, is there a particular sector or sub-industry that you're spending more time on than others?
Absolutely. So my background has been in financial services. I've spent my entire career there to date. So I've really front-loaded the search with financial services as an industry. And within that, there are multiple different areas to look, but I've looked at things like registered investment advisors, the service providers to them. If you find a good industry, it's great to look at the service providers that are working with them. Then I've also looked at just other things within financial services that are kind of getting away from wealth management into things like servicing, loan portfolios, as an example.
Sure.
But I've been really heavily focused on financial services, starting to move my way out of it, but I'm still there for now.
Yeah, my guess is that given your background, you gain a level of credibility with a seller. Just understanding how to speak the language and approach sort of the industry and the conversations. Talk a little bit about your positioning when talking to an RIA, for example, vis-a-vis something in a space that you might not necessarily have experience in.
It's unbelievably helpful. I think I'm a charter holder, a CFA charter holder, and it holds a lot of weight in the RIA world. And I think outside of it, I don't know that people even know what it is. But it's one of those things where I've literally gotten on the phone with a business owner, and I started to talk about who I was, and he's like, I'm going to stop you now. He's like, I see you're a CFA charter holder. You went to the University of Chicago. We don't need to talk about your credibility anymore.
Yeah.
Literally stopped me.
Instant credibility.
Instant credibility, and we moved right on to the next part of the discussion.
That's great. That's great. Shifting gears a little bit, you've obviously raised a search fund. You've got a set of investors. I'd love to hear a little bit about sort of your interaction with them, how you're keeping them abreast of your search activity, your deal flow. What does that look like on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis?
Sure. I have 15 investors. They're all different in terms of how they want to be communicated with. I'd say, though, some of the generalities, small portion of them want frequent communication. I have literally one investor, and this is more for me than it is for him, that likes to catch up on a bi-weekly basis and just get on the phone, talk about where we're headed and what things that we're looking at and seeing. About maybe a tenth of my investor group they'll get monthly communications from me, and I'll just tell them, this is where I've been focused, these are the things that I'm seeing, this is where I am with a few deals. And then the majority of my investor group is very hands-off, and I only send them quarterly updates. And of course, throughout all this, there's ad hoc communication going on between us. And I like to find ways to get in touch with my investors on a more regular basis, but for things that matter to them. So if it's something that a business that they've been involved with before, an industry they've been involved with before, finding a reason to reach out to them for help, or if it's a particular type of a question that I have in terms of like deal structuring, or how do I convince somebody, or where do I find this resource, trying to match that up with the right investor and think about that. And I regularly find opportunities to do that, to communicate with my investors that way.
Clearly, a part of this model is mentorship and guidance. You've never been down this path before, and presumably several of your 15 investors have, and they've run businesses, they've conducted searches. How available have you found the folks that you're sort of, for the specific interaction that you're looking to get out of them, how available have they been to assist in your efforts?
I'd say they've been incredibly helpful, and they've made themselves available when they're needed. And I stress that when needed, because I want to, if they understand if there's a good fit for them in terms of their mentoring and their advice, and if you can help them match the problem to their background, then they're more likely to be right on top of it and available. But I just say, generally speaking, they've been incredibly helpful. I've had them on calls with bankers before. I've talked to them about deal flow. I've talked to them about all sorts of things that you might want to ask.
You're a solo searcher. Oftentimes in the model, you'll see a partnership. You've clearly decided to go down this path alone, which can be a lonely and bumpy path. Help us understand the decision to go down this alone as opposed to joining forces with a partner.
It was a difficult one. I think when I first started this process, I didn't have a background in investment banking, private equity. I didn't have, I really didn't fit the mold, as it were, for what I saw on some of the research papers from like Stanford, for example. And they talk about backgrounds. I really didn't feel like I fit the mold. I didn't go to Harvard, I didn't go to Stanford, I didn't have these things from investment banking, private equity. So I felt like it was important to find that and partner with it to go get and raise the fund. And that was the wrong way of thinking. It's more about, it's not about the fundraising that you should worry about, I think, a partner on, and it's more about like past that fundraising point, when you're in the search, when you're out getting the company, when you're in operating the company, how is that partner gonna help you? So I think I struggled from that short-sighted sort of viewpoint, and it really didn't work out for me. And then I finally came to the realization that I could do this on my own from a fundraising perspective, and I felt confident in my ability to do it in both the search and the operating phase. But it was a process I had to go through.
Yeah, post-acquisition, now think, hopefully only a few months out, maybe as much as a year out from now. What are those gaps during the operation of the business that you might need to fill, just knowing yourself and your own skill set? How have you thought about filling those gaps?
So it's difficult to say because each company will present, I think, a different problem set. But in general, I certainly would have, I'm more of an outside sort of sales personality that will love to be in front of clients, running around, talking to people, thinking about strategy, getting sales done. I could definitely use a partner on the inside, somebody that could be watching the house or the shop and looking through financials, working the financial side of things. Not that I'm completely weak in the financial area, but it's just something that I haven't had as much experience with from a day-to-day responsibility standpoint, like a CFO type role.
Yep, something that might influence the way you evaluate a team as you're going in for diligence, in a way that a partnership that has a externally focused professional like yourself, as well as an internally focused professional, might sort of impact the way that you think about the attractiveness of an opportunity for you.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, great. I'd like to finish with just a little bit of insight into your interactions with business owners. That's clearly a huge part of what you're going through right now. We talked about the credibility piece. How have you found those interactions with business owners to go? And what's your story, and how has that story been received by these owner operators, presumably?
It's been very interesting, I'd say. There has been a wide range of reactions. I'd say for the most part, you deal with a certain amount of skepticism, and people look at you and they say, "You're just a baby. What are you doing? You trying to take over my company? This is crazy." There's some anger, there's some frustration, but I'd say, by and large, if you come off with confidence and you know what you're talking about, and you can get onto that next conversation. You can get them to start believing in you and trusting you. The story resonates of a search fund. I lean heavily on it, and I'll typically come in, and my initial discussion with them, I don't try and talk about what a search fund is. I just say, how we're different than what they might have come across in the past, and I say, we have a group of operators that I'm working with that all have had experience running companies before. They're very talented people. I send them to my website to take a look at those backgrounds of those individuals. I also bring up that we're looking to get involved directly in your business. So this is me. I will be joining your company, and this will be my full-time ambition. This fund will go away. We will be part of your business, and we will be growing this. And this is all we're going to focus on. We're not building a portfolio. We're going to be focusing on this one business that we can grow the heck out of and just put all of our time into. Some of those things are very different than what they've heard in the past. A lot of those things, probably all of them, are different what they've heard in the past from like a private equity or strategic buyer, and it resonates.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of go there. It's a nice transition. So Your competition here is a strategic buyer, potentially a financial buyer, and maybe your biggest competition is the notion of holding the business and not selling. How has your story as a search funder and the package that you're creating in the opportunity to buy this business, how has that presented advantages or disadvantages vis-a-vis private equity, strategic buyer, or the decision to not sell?
I'd say the decision not to sell is by far the hardest competitor to come across. The other ones are just it's not even in the same ballpark. It's just like, it's a totally different game. But when you have a business owner that's pulling away like $2 to $3+ million a year, and it's a pretty easy glide path for a lot of them, and they don't have to make a lot of changes. For them to say, will I see another Shamus in 12 months? The probability of that is probably pretty high in their head. They're probably thinking they'll see another person like me in 12 months, and they get to pocket another $3 million and sell a business. So it's a difficult thing. You've got to work on a lot of different aspects of what's their motivation to sell, to get around it. But on the financial and the strategic side, I don't think that it's not nearly as difficult to overcome. Getting directly involved in the business, not cost cutting, wanting to see this grow, keeping all the employees engaged and involved, offering flexibility in how you do a deal, and being attentive and having a lot of speed that something like a strategic buyer has a difficulty with. I mean, you've got all these things in your favor.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing a good job with it, Shamus. It sounds like your pipeline continues to grow and you're working on some really exciting and interesting things. So thank you for taking the time. I know time is a scarce resource and you've been very generous with it. So thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you everyone for listening and watching in to this edition of the Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition podcast.